During the course of the last several months, there have been contacts between the U.S. and the Cuban government. And in December, as a consequence of some of the groundwork that had been laid, both myself and President Castro announced a significant change in policy and the relationship between our two governments.
And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, along with my co-hosts Rick Unger, Jane Velez-Mitchell, and Nick Adams. That was the president just a few days ago, meeting with Cuban President Raul Castro. It marks the first time a U.S. president has shaken the hand of a Cuban leader since, get this, 1956. Today, the president continued the goodwill when he announced the State Department would be removing Cuba from the list of countries that sponsor terrorism. In a message to Congress, the president said, and we quote, "The government of Cuba has not provided any support for international terrorism during the preceding 6-month period, and the government of Cuba has provided assurances that it will not support acts of international terrorism in the future," unquote. Cuba has been on the terror list since 1982, when they were supporting an armed revolution by communist forces in Latin America. Anti-Castro Cubans in Miami obviously outraged at the news, and Mario Diaz-Balart, a congressman who was born in Cuba under the Castro regime, had this to say about the president's actions. Another quote: "Once again, President Obama has demonstrated that his eagerness to capitulate to dictators has no bounds," unquote. Okay, guys, starting with you, Nick, was it time to take Cuba off the terror list?
Well, I think there's certainly a case to be made for that, Joe. If there's going to be a reset, if you like, to use terminology that applies to a different part of the world.
Just no button.
Just no button.
Please,
that's
no button.
exactly right, no button. But if there is going to be this reset, then I guess it makes sense to remove Cuba off the list. 1956 is a long time ago. I don't think even Rick was quite born then. And, so I think that if that's the way that America's going to move forward, then that's probably a good move. But I guess the upside is that we're going to be able to have Cuban cigars in America.
Well, that's a very good point. And Rick, you're a big fan of that, I know.
Huge. Look, I mean, it was interesting the way the president phrased it. He said that they've had no international terrorism support in 6 months. That's the technical legal language to meet the test.
Longer than
in
that.
reality, it's been 20 years since there's been an accusation of Cuba being involved in anything relating to terrorism. It's absolutely time they came off the list. It is what stands between the opportunity to put embassies up there and here. It's absolutely the right thing to do. This is going to be a good thing for American business. It's time, and yeah, it's going to be great to get those cigars without having to go through all of the rigmarole
What do you think
that
took
I
so
have
long?
to go through.
What do you think took so long in terms of this removal if they haven't done anything
What
in
took
20
so
years?
long is people like Congressman Beyer who represent people in Florida who are married to a past of hatred of Castro.
Well, let me say
I
this.
appreciate they hate Castro. I do. But, there's a whole country out here beyond the aging Cuban population in Florida.
We have to have some sympathy for those people, because I grew up, I'm Puerto Rican, but my family had a lot of friends from Cuba
Right.
who spoke of horrific things that happened to their relatives under the Castro regime. So they are living with those memories, and horrible things were done under the Castro regime. But I agree, it's time to move on, and frankly, I think this is part of Obama's legacy. It dovetails with what he's doing with Iran. He wants to go down in history as the forward-thinking, modern president who sort of brought rogue states in and created a policy of inclusion and ended isolation. And, I think he's doing a very good job at that. We are describing him in a sense as a lame duck president, but look what he's accomplishing in these last couple of years.
No question about it. He's giving an absolute new definition to the notion of lame duck presidency. Nobody saw that coming. And he is just rocking. You may like it, you may hate
Well,
it,
hold on,
but
guys.
he is busy.
Let's not get too excited
Oh, it's
now.
true. It's true.
Let's not get too excited.
Say, you may not
now,
like
Rick.
what he's
I mean,
doing.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, he remains a lame duck president. If you have a look all throughout the world, apart from Cuba, what else suggests that he is not the lamest of lame ducks?
Iran. What he's
Yeah.
doing with
What about
Iran.
What about Iran?
Making a deal.
Yeah, but that's not a good deal for America.
No, I just
That's
said,
not a good deal.
wait. I said you may like it or you may hate it. You're commenting on the deal. The fact that he's doing all these things, lame duck presidents here do not get this involved in these sort of things.
Rick,
you may not like it.
Let's take a macro look at things. There is not a place in the world, there is not a relationship that America has that is not weaker solely
But
because
again,
of
you're
President Obama.
judging. You're not speaking to the question. You're judging his success
Are you
or
telling me-
lack of success.
Well, Rick, are you telling me that when President Obama sits down with a foreign leader, that he is respected, that they don't see him
That's not
as
what
a
we're
weak,
talking about.
insipid leader?
I'm not telling you that because we're not talking about that. We're
What
talking
leader?
about
I mean,
a
he's
lame
been dealing
duck
with 5 other
president versus
nations
what he is or
and
isn't
dealing with
doing.
the Iran deal. There's plenty of world leaders that he's dealt with. I think the only problem is that when they found they were being eavesdropped on, and I don't think that was something that he personally ordered.
Well, America's been doing that since the beginning of time. There's nothing
Well,
wrong
sure
with that.
we
You've
have.
got to keep tabs on people. But look, I think that it's fair to say that despite Cuba, despite a couple of other things, President Obama remains a figure in the world that doesn't have much power.
You might be right, but not the issue.
But
It doesn't speak to whether or not he's an active lame duck
you have to say
president.
this about the man, he's staying active, no question. Anyway, it's potluck time next. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax.